How we doing, YouTube? Silverback here, and I am finally back. I had some technical difficulties keeping me from making videos. Took care of one issue and another arose, and now that's taken care of, so we're good to go. First thing I wanted to do is talk about some of the spoilers that have been shown for the new Zendikar Rising set, and talk about the ones that I think slide into Dimir Flash the best. Some that fill in some spots that we've been missing as far as standard 2021 goes. I haven't been playing normal standard for a long while. I've been playing nothing but standard core set 2021. And it was apparent that there was a few things missing that we did have and a few things we've never had. So the big question is, do these new cards that we get in Zendikar Rising, do they fill any of our voids or any of our empty slots? Or are we just boned and doomed to be a tier 2 deck forever and ever? Well, let's take a look at the most relevant cards and find out. So Zendikar Rising, there's a few cards that have been spoiled that kind of piqued my interest for our Dimir Flash deck, and they're with our creatures and the way I like to play Dimir Flash. I like to have a lot of cheap creatures with right around 2 or 3 power, because I like to have options on how we win the game. We can win with a lot of cheap creatures against usually against Doom Foretold or Controlling deck. We try to get underneath of them, get a Nightbonder down, turn off their counters, and just chip away at them with a Blacklands Paragon, a Nightbonder, maybe a Brazen Bower, so on and so on. Another way that I like to win with the deck is by pinging our opponent out with Slither Wisp. So maybe they have a board full of creatures that we can't break through. But we have 1 or 2 Slither Wisps on the board. We can usually draw into more Flash creatures to keep pinging them, reducing their cost with Nightbonder, and winning in that style. Another way I like to win is by clogging up the board, keeping our opponent at bay until we can get our large, monstrous Lochmere Serpent or whatever large threat we're playing on the board, and beating our opponent out in 2 swings or so with our big threat and protecting it. So keeping that in mind, I don't know that our thoughts and our avenues of winning are really going to change that much. Our least common way of winning, but one that I have done before, is milling out with Thieves, Guild Enforcer, by playing rogues, getting multiples down, and getting your opponent's library into their graveyard. That's extremely hard way to win with the deck, but it is an avenue we have. Keeping in with that, I think Zareth San the Trickster might open up another avenue or strategy for the deck to win. It's a Flash legendary creature, a Merfolk Rogue, for 3 of anything, a blue and a black. It says that you can pay 2 blue and black and return an unblocked attacking rogue you control to its owner's hand. Put Zareth San the Trickster from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. So basically it's ninjutsu, which is a fan favorite card type for commander and things of that sort. But when it does get through for that unblocked combat damage, you may put a permanent card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So this opens up some avenues for us. Again, if we were just to slot that in, I play, I think, about 15 rogues in my most common build of Dimir Flash. We slot that in, maybe we can mill out Ugin, or maybe we blow up a big threat of theirs, a Terror of the Peaks, something. We can basically use the Trickster and get that on our side of the board. So just imagine stealing their Ugin, stealing whatever they have in their graveyard after dealing with it, after milling it. I mean, this is a very powerful effect, but it is 5 mana, so it would probably take over our top end. It would have to take the place of Lochmere Serpent, I would think. And I'm not 100% sure which one I like better. I need to play with Zareth San and see how he feels and how he fits into the deck. But he is probably the most exciting Flash creature we got. Very excited to play him and other Flash creatures. He fits into the Flash strategy very nicely. So your opponent thinks you have no creatures on board, they swing out, tap out, and then you flash out a creature on the end of their turn. On your attack step, you can attack with any creature that you flashed in, unblocked, and possibly get something of theirs onto the battlefield on our side. So he does fit into the Flash strategy, I think. I think he's probably going to be a definite include, but I'd like to play with him, see how the meta lines up, and see where he fits in. The other card, creature card that I'm considering, which is nowhere near as exciting as Zereth Sand the Trickster, is simply Zulaport Duelist, 1 blue, taking over the Spectral Sailor slot. He's Flash, human rogue. So Dimir Flash is kind of, it might end up being a pseudo rogue deck. I don't know. Especially if we're going to play Zereth Sand, Thieves Guild Enforcer, Cunning Nightbonder. I mean, we already have the rogue pieces in place. But Zulaport Duelist for 1 blue, human rogue. It's a 1/1 Flash. When Zulaport Duelist enters the battlefield, up to 1 target creature gets -2/-0 until end of turn. Its controller mills 2 cards. So, with this card, 1 mana, we play it down. We get to make one of our opponent's creatures weaker, possibly making a block in our favor or an attack in our favor, somewhere in those lines. And I already been playing Threnody Singer for 2 mana. So I think this would easily take Threnody Singer's slot, because it is a rogue. It isn't as good of an effect, but milling 2 cards is good, because I've been trying to get Drown in the Lock to work as our main counter spell, but without Thieves Guild Enforcer, Drown in the Lock doesn't really work. So if we don't draw the Thieves Guild Enforcer and we're waiting for our opponent to naturally fill his graveyard, Drown in the Lock feels a lot worse. So playing some more cards that mills our opponent, turning on our Drown in the Lock, especially in early game, I think that's a huge plus. I think it's enough of an upside for it to take Threnody Singer's spot. And I think it plays well enough into the rest of our strategies, turning on Zereth Sand, turning on Slitherwisp, etc., etc. So that's one I'm definitely going to experiment with early on. It's not super exciting, but I think it's good enough. Outside of that, I got a single counter spell that I'm thinking about adding to the deck. So I just talked about Drown in the Lock, and Drown in the Lock does nothing until your opponent has cards in his graveyard. Well, we have Anti-Cognition here for 1 of anything in a blue, an instant. Counter target creature planeswalker spell unless its controller pays 2. If an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, instead counter that spell, then scry 2. So it turns into a hard counter when your opponent's graveyard is filled, but it can be a sort of narrow quench until you turn it on for its hard counter half. And we've shown quench has been pretty decent. Looking at standard core set 2021, I think creature decks, planeswalker decks, are going to be pretty prevalent in the early going. We're going to see a lot of, in my estimation, a lot of monocolored decks, a lot of adventure decks. I don't know how much that changes after Zendikar comes out, but just based off of what I've seen now, I think there's enough targets for something like Anti-Cognition to be effective. I'd like to play that along with the Drown in the Lock. I don't know how many parts of each, but I think that is another card. If we're going to go with a pseudo-mill strategy, where we're milling things with Thieves Guild Enforcer, with Zulaport Duelist, trying to reanimate them, I think this card fits into that strategy very well. But again, we'll just have to see. Outside of that, there's really nothing that Dimir Flash is too excited for, and we're not getting a whole lot, I don't think. But again, we got to see how this new meta pans out. You know, maybe some of our old cards, Voracious Great Shark, Dirge Bat, Pouncing Shore Shark, you know, some of the cards that we haven't been able to use because they haven't been too effective, Maybe they become more effective in the standard and we don't need a whole lot of new stuff. We're just going to have to wait and see how it pans out. But another thing I want to talk about is the lands and the land cycle. So the flip lands. I see no reason not to run some of these flip lands if you're going to be playing basic swamps anyway. So something like Black Bloom Rogue. For 2 of anything in a black, it's a creature, human rogue, keeping up with that rogue theme. It is not a flash creature, but its land half warrants an addition, I think. And you're going to see a lot of this in the new standard and probably in Magic moving forward. I think these flip lands are a great idea. I think it even solves the issue of mana and Magic and being mana screwed. And you know, if every card tapped for mana on their backside, there would never ever be a mana screw. There would be a lot more strategy even. But that's, you know, obviously not every card is going to be like that. But for this human rogue, 2 of anything in a black Bloom Rogue, it has Menace. And it gets +3/+0 as long as an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. So it has a 2/3 body. It could easily be a 5/3 for 3 mana with Menace. That's not bad. Or the worst case scenario comes in as a tap swamp. I think playing a few of those is not a bad idea. I know it's not a flash card, but it's basically taking up one of your land slots. And yes, it sucks that it comes in tapped, but you know, it's still a land. And my argument is there's cards that basically lightning bolt you so that you can play them untapped and whatnot. I think there's a lot of these lands, these flip lands, that we're going to end up playing. Even though they're not flash cards, I think the upside is just too good. I think these lands are really going to change the upcoming standard and probably change Magic from here on out. Maybe I'm overestimating them, but I see no reason not to run a couple of these, especially the ones that fit into one or more of our themes. The only other card I'm going to talk about is a sideboard piece, Confounding Conundrum, for 1 of anything in a blue enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and then whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player had another land enter the battlefield under their control this turn, they return a land they control to its owner's hand. So basically, if they're ramping land, they've already played one, they play Uro and play another land, it goes back to their hand, or any land goes back to their hand. And with the amount of tap lands in Standard, I think that could be very devastating to a 3-color, even a 2-color deck. So definite sideboard tech there. I think that's a card that should go in. Everybody that's playing blue should go into their sideboard. And I think it'll help us keep up with the Adventures deck, the Uro deck. I mean, imagine, you know, our opponent right now in Adventures on Standard 2021 plays a Beanstalk Giant with 2 or even 3 of the artifact that doubles up their adventure triggers, the Lucky Clover. That would basically make that useless. Yeah, they get to find lands and put them out in the battlefield, but then they're going to have to put lands back into their hand. I guess the issue there, it's not useless because they're getting more untapped lands, but basically it's doing nothing until they get enough to go up a land, I guess, after playing it, if that makes any sense. But definite sideboard tech there. So in my estimation, again, so far, based off of the spoilers I've seen, Xerath Sand is probably going to be either a big benefit to our deck, making it extremely competitive moving forward, or it could be a big bust. We'll just have to wait and see. Outside of that, Zulaport Duelist I can see being, if not a very exciting inclusion, still an easy inclusion into the deck, especially if we're going with a mill your opponent to turn your things on. We might have more counterspell focus. Maybe Didn't Say Please goes in the deck. We kind of mill our opponent a little bit, turn our stuff on, and go to Pound Town. Anti-Cognition could be a good counter for the deck. It depends how Planeswalker and creature heavy that the meta truly is. If not, it could be a decent sideboard piece. The flip lands like Black Bloom Rogue and other ones similar to it, I see no reason not to run those, even if they don't match up with our flash strategy. Still just way too much upside, way too powerful not to be running a few of those. And not even specifically Black Bloom Rogue, he just kind of fit into our theme really nicely, for an example. And then Confounding Conundrum, a good sideboard piece for any blue deck. So those are my thoughts on probably the most effective pieces that Dimir Flash is getting. If I missed anything, please let me know down in the comments. Feels good to be back doing the videos. I'm going to get back into the swing of things. Start producing more and more content like I was doing. And other than that, leave me a like, a comment, subscribe. Leave me a dislike if this video bored the crap out of you. And other than that, I should see you in the next one. I'll get a bunch of gameplay up here very soon. This has been Silverback, out.